Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Annie Rogers, and on behalf of the Attitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation titled Meet the Teacher: How to Build Relationships This Back-to-School Season. With each new school year comes the same shared goal: to foster an effective learning environment for students. For students with ADHD, this may mean understanding and accommodating neurodivergent learning styles, emphasizing strengths, and exploring interests, all of which requires open communication between caregivers and teachers. In today's webinar, parents and teachers will learn how, what, and when to communicate for a calm and successful new school year. We will discuss tools and tips for collaborating in person and via targeted emails to decode and support a student's needs. Leading today's presentation is Cindy Goldrich. Cindy is a mental health counselor, ADHD certified clinical service provider, and teacher trainer. As an ADHD specialist, she supports parents, educators, and other professionals in addressing the impact of ADHD and executive functioning on learning, motivation, and behavior. Cindy received her Master of Education in Counseling Psychology from Columbia University Teachers College and her ADHD Coach certification from the Institute for Certified ADHD Professionals. She has trained with Dr. Edward Hollowell and Dr. Ross Green. Cindy is a recognized keynote speaker and provides professional development for school districts and other professional organizations worldwide, addressing how ADHD and executive function challenges affect children and how to help boost behavior and performance in school and at home. She's known to be a passionate and engaging speaker. She's also the author of 8 Keys for Parenting Children with ADHD, a book recognized for providing parents, educators, and therapists with a practical, easy-to-read guide for addressing challenging kids, and also author of ADHD, Executive Function, and Behavior in the Classroom. Cindy is the creator of the workshop series Calm and Connected: Parenting Children with ADHD, designed to teach parents and caregivers how to successfully manage and support their children's unique needs. For more information, you can email Cindy at cindy@ptscoaching.com. You can visit ptscoaching.com, or you can see Cindy's LinkedIn page. Before I hand over the microphone to Cindy, I have just a few housekeeping items. Those of you tuned into the live webinar may submit questions for our expert at any time by navigating to the text box under the video player. To download the slides, click on the Event Resources section of your webinar screen. And if you are interested in the Certificate of Attendance option, look for instructions in the email you will receive about an hour after the live broadcast. If you are listening in replay or podcast mode, visit attitudemag.com and search podcast number 413 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the Certificate of Attendance option. If you support the work we're doing here at Attitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine. You can get ready for the back to school season with our fall issue, which includes our annual Success at School section, including articles on homework help, teacher collaboration, ADHD accommodations, bullying, and much, much more. Finally, the sponsor of today's webinar is Equizen Pro. Equizen Pro is a clinically proven nutritional medical food designed to help improve focus, attention, academic performance, and balance mood for those with ADHD. Clinical studies have shown Equizen Pro can improve ADHD symptoms in as little as 12 weeks. Now's the perfect time to start supporting your child's mind and get them ready for back to school. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without any further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Cindy Goldrich. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this really timely and important back to school discussion.
Absolutely. And I thank you all for having me. I've always enjoyed the support of Attitude Magazine, and I love getting to speak to all of you out there. So, yes, I am Cindy Goldrich, and we are going to talk about back to school. Not just meet the teacher, but the teacher meet the student, and the teacher meet the parent as well. We're going to be looking at what are the desires of the student. What does the student really want this year, right? Last year was a little easier COVID-wise, but still was very traumatic and difficult. But even COVID aside, we know that school can be challenging. So what does our student want out of this year? What does the parent want? You know, now as we think about a new year, we want to think about what do we want this year to look like for our child? And also for the teacher. You know, shout out to the teachers. It is a hard, demanding, complex job. A lot of people and needs to manage. So how can we support the teachers in supporting the kids and having relationships with the parents? I think all three are so important. And yes, I do encourage all of your questions. And if for some reason I don't have time to answer all of the questions during this, or you don't want to pose your question, you know, right now, and you think of it later on, please, you can always email me, cindy@ptscoaching.com, or look at the resources on my website. So without further ado, let's talk about the kids. The question is, anyone ever hear these statements? Overheard in the halls, in their homes, inside their heads. Kids are saying, you know, this year's going to be different. I'm going to get all A's this year. I'm going to make the baseball team or the soccer team, or I'm going to get to be in that show this year. I'm going to make new friends. Right? For some of the kids, socially, it's a real struggle. And all they want to do this year is just fit in and feel good. They're not necessarily even thinking about the academics right now. I'm not going to get any fights this year, or I'm not going to let myself get bullied. This year, I'm going to know what to do. So the kids have a lot of thoughts and anticipation as they enter the school year. One of the things I think is really important, and I talk about this a lot in my work, as adults, both the parents and the professionals, we think so much about the academics. We need to support the other aspects of who these kids are, because if we can't help them feel safe and comfortable in their environment, they're not going to learn as well. So all of these things we need to look at a little bit. Now, when we think about what we want for the new year, this is some of the things the kids are thinking about. I hope as parents and as educators and as the professionals who work with these kids, whether you're the speech language pathologist or the occupational therapist or the school counselor, we also have our, goals for this year. One thing to remember, though, is that a goal without a plan is really just a wish. Without a well thought out and detailed plan, it's nothing more than just a dream or bravado or magical thinking. What is magical thinking? Magical thinking is when you believe in something without really evidence to, back that up. For example, I don't have to write down what my homework is. I'll remember. Or I don't have to go to the practices. I'm going to make the team, right? It's that belief in ourselves and belief in that what we want, we're going to really manifest. The thing is, we need to work toward it. In fact, research actually backs this up. It says that when people set goals and really work toward the goals, not only do they perform better, but they experience less stress and less anxiety, and they're happier and they're more satisfied with their lives. So think about that for a moment. Setting goals can really be valuable. Okay, so I just want to briefly talk about the goal, the benefits of setting goals, not just for the kids, but again, for the adults as well. We know that when you set a goal, it helps you prioritize what's really important. So one of the things I recommend right now when you think about that new school year is just jot down those top of mind thoughts. What do you want for this year? Right? And whether it's academically, how you want your child to do, or socially, or, maybe physically, maybe you want them having more exercise, maybe health-wise, maybe you want them, brushing their teeth and showering more, whatever those things are, give some thoughts about what's really important here. It also helps you think positively about the possibilities you have in your life. Wow, if we could accomplish that goal, think of how much easier things would be. And it helps you design a pathway towards success. My business is called PTS Coaching because I think pathways to success, their pathway, these kids, is like this, right? It's not this straight line. But it also helps you push yourself toward your true desires. So spending a little time thinking about the goal is important. So what is our goal? Well, for parents, we want to feel that we're heard from the teachers and from our kids, and feel that our child is really receiving the support that they need. I'm not going to go too much into the weeds in terms of IEPs and 504s. I know Attitude has wonderful resources for you about all of that. But we want to think about what is it that your child needs in order to succeed. Also, for the teachers, what do you want? Well, teachers want to feel respected for their knowledge, their care, but also their time. I speak with so many teachers as I do the teacher trainings, and I know that for many of them, they're so well-meaning, and they just feel like, I know the parent is asking me to do this little thing, but they don't realize how much that little thing adds up with all the students and all the other expectations that I have. So teachers are really asking, can people understand the complexity of my job and what some of these extra demands, although they are valuable, what that means and how really the parents can help the teachers implement some of these. Also, the students, right? Students want to feel successful. And for many, they want to feel independent and they want to feel trusted. Very often, kids feel like, if people would just let me be, I could be successful. But we know as parents, we know as educators that sometimes they do need more of that support. But especially, I always say in my parent coaching, if you've got a teenager and you say the word Black, what is the job of a teenager? To say white. Their job is to become more independent. So we realize that we're dealing with that push-pull at the same time as well. So we want to help everyone work together to meet these goals, to all work together on behalf of the same goal, which is helping that student have a good, successful year. So let's start off. We're going to talk first about the parents, then we're going to talk about the educators, and then we're going to talk about the teachers. So parents, what really are your concerns as you think about this new year? One thing parents are very often concerned about is the amount of the work reasonable given your child's profile? Your child may be in 4th grade or 8th grade or 12th grade. Is the amount of work they're being given something that they can do? In parent coaching, one of the things I think is most important is I do a lot of education about the social and emotional impact of ADHD and executive function challenges on learning, on motivation, on behavior. The first most important thing is being educated about our child's profile, understanding how are things like their processing speed or their working memory impacting the amount of work they can do, because this has nothing to do with their intelligence, right? You may have a child who's got a very high IQ, is very, very capable, but that doesn't mean that they can do all the reading required for the class, all of the homework that's required without undue stress or pressure. Also, is the level of work reasonable for your child? Okay. If your child has any kind of learning disabilities, or maybe they had a really rough year last year and they didn't quite master all of the math that they needed to. The opposite can be true as well. We know many kids with ADHD are gifted. And what I mean by that is they have a very high IQ. You may hear terms like twice exceptional, which means they have a high IQ, but yet they still have some of these challenges. But we want to make sure that we are challenging them intellectually. Also, is the IEP and or the 504 plan being appropriately implemented? Very often we work so hard as parents to get the right IEP or the 504, but if we're not in the classroom, we don't always know that everything's being implemented as it should, especially if you've got a younger child, because kids are not always great reporters of what's going on for them. So we want to figure out, is everything in that IEP or that 504 being, utilized? Is your child expected to complete schoolwork that was unfinished during the class time? I bet if I could see a lot of your faces and I ask this question, I'll get a lot of agreement here. How many of your kids ended up with extra work that maybe they didn't finish during the class time, to the point where that kind of piled up over and over and over, so your kid has so much more work than the classwork? One of the things I really empower parents to do, and I talk to teachers about, is if a child is not finishing the work at school, before we just send it home, we have to realize a few things. Did this child not complete it at school, during school, because he just was being lazy or didn't want to? Or was it maybe because of his own, neurobiology, that maybe he couldn't get it done in that time because he was anxious or he was overwhelmed or he needed to slow down the process? So what happens when we send that work home is now he's got his homework plus this work, and the reality is his homework is probably taking him longer too. So we don't want to kind of have the double jeopardy, punish the kid, because they need their break too. So if that's what's going on, I would strongly recommend you talk to the teacher about what can we do about the unfinished classwork. And there's lots of different ways I support in dealing with that. And then we have, how can you best collaborate with your child's teacher? A lot of parents feel like the teacher doesn't respond to me, the teacher doesn't listen, although many times they feel, wow, the teacher is amazing, the teacher really is responsive. But you're going to have a new teacher, you're going to have agreement about how can we work best together. Here's another really important thing to consider, which is your child. And again, regardless of what age your child's in, you want to get your child's input. You got to gather some information about your child's concerns and perspectives for this new school year. What are the greatest challenges your child faced in learning during the class and in doing their work? Ask your child. Maybe, certain classes went easier than others. Maybe it's something as simple as, oh, I was seated next to a kid that was, driving me crazy all day, or I was in the front of the classroom and everyone behind me, I want to know what was going on, and I wish I was sitting in the back of the class. Any of these things, you want to really ask your kid, what would make this school year better for you? Also, what do they think would make an easier learning environment, both at home and at school? A lot of times parents think, I'm going to make sure that my kid has the perfect desk this year and they're going to do their homework at the desk. That may not be the right learning environment. I know that when I talk to parents, sometimes their kids would rather sit on the floor. It's not about where they're sitting. It's about how effective they are there. And finally, what involvement would they like from you? I know many of you, the parents, are very anxious and you want to know, do you have your homework? What is your homework? Show me your homework when it's done. We don't want our kids to fail. We don't want our kids to struggle, but sometimes we need to leave a little more space so that they can get to feel and recognize what they are really capable of, where they are really struggling. So ask them, what's the role you want me to play? And that may be its own collaborative negotiation. One thing I find helpful, and by the way, there are a few handouts that I have. I am happy to send these to you. Just email me, cindy@ptscoaching.com. From this, I have a few handouts that I'd love to share with each of you. This is one of them. And you can modify this based on whatever language you want to use with your kids, but really go over with them what worked and what didn't. What did I do to prepare for exams that worked really well in each of these areas? What did I do that maybe wasn't worth it? At the beginning of the school year, is it still a good time to kind of think back about last year? What could I have done that either I forgot to do or didn't do it, think of it until it was too late? And finally, what can I do throughout the term to prepare for my midterms, my finals, for my projects, to make things easier? Another thing you can do is help them by taking stock of where they are now. One of the things I really like is something called the Wheel of Life. Okay, this is a coaching technique we use all the time. Lots of different ways to look at it. This is one that I filled in already, but you can have a lot of blanks and do it with your child. I'm just going to walk you through this. These are what I think as some of the major areas that we want kids to feel competent in, right? Their note-taking skills, their study skills, how they manage their time, how organized they are, right? How they deal with their stress, how they are taking tests and quizzes, how they are writing papers, and self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is so important and taken for granted all the time. We expect kids, oh, you're in 5th grade now. You know how to talk to the teacher. You should be able to, right? And we're going to talk about that a little later. Advocacy is a developmental skill. So what I suggest in using a wheel like this, and there's lots of different ways to do it, but what I suggest is that you help your child see, and these really are representing a lot of the executive function skills, and you can talk to them about what your executive function skills are. I have a whole poster that's hanging up in a lot of classrooms. I really think it's so valuable to show kids what the executive functions are, right? And then what you'll do is you'll ask them to rate themselves on each of these. So if they feel like they're relatively weak on this, let's say note-taking, they would put a 1. If they feel like that's a real strength, maybe they're going to put a 4 or a 5. So in each of these areas, you're going to put one of those. And then the challenge is, and the reason I do this, I say you can't add up to more than 40 points and you can't have fewer than 5. Because what you'll find is that a lot of kids are going to say, oh, I'm perfect on all of these. I don't need anything. Or if they were really so low self-esteem, they may say, well, I'm doing poorly on all of these. We want them to distinguish the different areas. And then you can look and you could say, what are 2 steps that you can take to improve on the 3 areas where you scored the lowest? Okay. And that's where you're going to start your goal setting. Maybe at the beginning of the year, you're going to talk about, if they say, yeah, I'm just so disorganized, then maybe one of the things you're going to do is say, okay, how can we help you? What do you mean by being disorganized? Where are you disorganized, right? A lot of parents are going to go in and say, well, okay, I'll organize you differently. This is not about organizing your student. This is about raising their awareness so that they are internalizing the questions involved in organization and their best way of organizing. Let's talk about communicating with the teacher. Well, what do you want to communicate? And this may be different for different subjects. English may be your child's favorite subject, and, they always get along great with the English teacher, and that's all smooth. But in the science, that's where they really struggle. So you may have a different communication. But also, let's talk about the pros and cons of knowing versus discovering. A lot of times people feel like, you know what, new year, clean slate. I don't really want to tell my teacher all about the struggles that my kid has. Let them discover the kid, right? I caution against some of this because we don't want to waste those first few weeks of school having the teacher have to figure certain things out. We want to give them this information because the teachers are savvy enough to know that kids do grow. They do evolve over the summer and through the year. So knowing versus discovering, give that some thought. Also, what are your child's strengths and their weaknesses? What has worked well for them in the past and what maybe hasn't? You know your kids best. You know how you need to speak to your child. You know what their concerns are. Also, a specific goal that your child has for the school year. We talked about the wheel of life, but also if your child's goal for the new year is that they really want to have, let's say, another friend or two, that may be so top of mind that they're not paying attention to the academics. So maybe if the teacher knows that, they can clue you into, maybe a kid that they should have a play date with, or maybe they want to seat them in a different place just to ease the stress of the child as the year starts. How do we communicate with the teachers? Well, please, succinctly and specifically. I can't say this enough. Teachers have so much on their plates. So use bullet points. I know some of us are very verbose. We want to explain everything. This is our child after all. We love them. We want to tell everything about them. But the bullet points will help the teacher read it in a nice, easy way, but also as they go back to read it. Maybe you're going to, and I'm going to talk to you about giving the teacher a letter. Maybe they're going to read it quickly at the beginning of the year, but maybe 2 weeks from now when something's going on, they're going to want to just scan this letter. So you're going to give them bullet points. Also, when should we communicate? Well, I suggest there are a few key times to communicate because things change. Before the school year begins, I think this is a great time. If you email me again, I'm happy to send you. I have a few letters that are templates that you can use to send to your teacher that outline some specific things about your child, right? So before the school year begins, you're going to send them something. And then maybe after 2 months, when everyone's had that adjustment period, you may want to go back and highlight a few things. And then after the new year, after that whole winter recess, when we have that reset, do it again. And then in early spring, when things have kind of, now we're nearing the end, but we're not there yet. We want to end strong. That's another good time to communicate. Now, just briefly about those grades, I know parents are so concerned about the grades. Here's the thing, and many of you are familiar with the work of Carol Dweck. She's the person that spearheaded that whole concept of growth mindset. And what she says is emphasizing effort gives a child a variable that they can control. They come to see themselves as in control of their own success. Emphasizing intelligence, well, that takes it out of the child's control, and it provides no good recipe for responding to failure. I want you to think about what is your mindset and how is this impacting your child. On my website, which is ETS Coaching, if you look at the resources, you'll see videos. There's a video presentation that I gave to parents called Skills for Success. Okay. And that's where I teach about growth mindset and how to help parents support their kids in terms of developing a growth mindset. But what role are you playing now in supporting your child in terms of supervision, of homework, of test prep, of projects? What were you doing last year? Let's talk about enabling versus supporting. Those of you who have taken any of my work, this is very important. Enabling a child, well, that's when we're doing it for them. right? Or we're making excuses. Oh, maybe the directions weren't clear enough, or maybe it was just a bad night, or, I'm just going to do it a little bit for my child because maybe they're not ready for it yet. That's not going to help move the child forward. My definition of enabling is doing something for someone else without a pathway to help them do it for themselves. So it's doing something for someone else without a pathway to help them do it for themselves, right? We need to help them figure out, how are you going to take this over? If I've been taking in your violin because you forgot it a few times this year, how am I going to help you remember to take in the violin? Okay. But you want to think about, what is the role you're playing now? Maybe you're playing a bigger role than your child wants you to, or than you should. So if it feels that way, reach out. These are the things we can help you with. The greatest impact that parents can have on their children with ADHD is to help them understand what is truly getting in the way of meeting their goals and providing them with the knowledge, the tools, and the strategies to succeed in school, at home, socially, and in life. So parents, get educated, right? It's the most valuable thing you can do. Now, let's talk about the teachers in terms of prepping for the new student. What would it be beneficial for you to know about the student at the start of the school year? And same thing I said before, what are the pros and cons of knowing versus discovering? A lot of times teachers really want to have a clean slate with the kid, but again, that balance between what would be helpful for me to know. So I suggest, as teachers, you actually reach into the parents and help them help you. Invite the input, help so that the parents can give you information in a way that you can synthesize it. So again, for the teachers, I actually have some templates on how to reach out and get that information from the parent. Here's just a sample, just a brief sample. If you think about it, if you ask the parent up front some of this information, that could really help you. So I'm just going to put this up here and I'll talk about it a little bit. How would you describe your student? What are their greatest interests, their talents and passions? If you have a student whose interest is in, a certain kind of history and you're teaching history, that clues you in, hey, I want to grab that kid and involve them as I'm teaching some of these lessons. What name does your child prefer to be called on? You don't want that awkwardness at the beginning of the year where you're trying to pronounce the name and the kid has a hard time, right? What are some of their concerns? And what else is important for me to know? And then honestly, just asking them, what is their preferred way of being contacted? Is it through cell? Is it through email? In terms of connecting with that new student, most students have internal thoughts and concerns each year, as I said when I started out, right? Whether they express them or not. So the more they feel heard and understand, the more likely they are to relax and be productive. So in terms of proactively creating a relationship, one of the things I like to suggest is having them answer a few questions, right? And again, I can send this all to you if you're concerned about not wanting to, write this all down. And this is just a sample, a snippet of what it is. But if you know some of these basic things, and even if you gather that information at the beginning of the year and just kind of glance at it after you've gotten to know them 2 months from now or 3 months from now, this can really help. And then let's talk about the student. Self-advocacy, as I said in that wheel of life, is a skill to be taught, not an expectation. Whether the kid's in 1st grade or 5th grade or 10th grade or the adult. We don't always advocate for ourselves, right? I was with a group of people on a hike the other day, and someone in the back was saying, oh my God, the leader's going too quickly. I can't keep up. But didn't feel comfortable saying to the leader of the hike, hey, could you slow down? We need to sometimes get support on how to have our own needs met. So does the student feel comfortable speaking up for their needs? Does the student know who they can come to ask for help? Right? Broaden their circle of who can support them. And does the student know the best way to get the help? In person, phone, email, Zoom. And would maybe a three-way meeting between the parent, the teacher, and the student be helpful? So much of this we do behind the kid's back, and I don't mean that in a malicious way, but sometimes having the student in there in the conversation is so much more productive for accountability, for more information. Now, if there's conflict, and unfortunately we know that there will be conflict sometimes, first thing is breathe. Without calm, can't get anywhere. Take time before you pick up a phone or send off an email to actually write down your thoughts and concerns and maybe share it with a friend. Maybe a friend or a colleague can kind of help you reframe certain things so that we're aware of how it's coming off. Also, parents, sometimes the teachers need more information about what's going on at home than they really have. Maybe they don't realize that you've got 3 kids and that the other one, is really giving you a hard time right now. Whatever that is, help the teacher know what's going on in your world. And teachers, sometimes parents need more information and support because you know what? It ain't easy, especially for those teachers who, haven't done this for many, many years. They may not understand the complexities of what's going on at home. And that's why that's so important. And remember, as I said before, include the student's perspective. And parents, whenever you're having a meeting with the teachers, bring someone who's not emotionally involved. Now, I'm not saying a paid advocate or a lawyer or anything like that. I mean someone that can help you hear and slow down the conversation, because when we get stressed, when any of us get stressed, it's harder for us to process, hold on to what we want to say or what we're hearing. And finally, teachers, if you feel like you're going to have a meeting with a parent that, you're concerned it's going to be stressful, bring in a colleague or a superior that can help with that meeting. Sometimes just having that third person there can diffuse a lot of things. So parents, never let your relationship with your child suffer at the altar of homework. They need you in their lives as allies. We need to keep it calm and allow for time for change to happen. We can seek help from others. And we must parent the child we have, not the child we thought we'd have or wish we'd have, not the child we'd have if our mother-in-law got her way, but that child we're blessed with. Okay? You are never alone in this. I just want to, as we get ready to open up for questions, I just want to make sure I have lots of resources. These are the 2 books I've written. The first book is for parents. The second book is a book I wrote with my daughter, who's a special ed, elementary ed teacher, and it's a real circle of support. It was written for professionals, but parents find it valuable as well. And I did mention parenting support. I just want to show you, this is a 7-session workshop series I have for parents on really understanding your kids and knowing how to parent them more effectively. Okay, so I want to turn this over now to the questions and see how I can support all of you.
Wonderful. Cindy, thank you so much for that presentation. And as we get started with Q&A, I'd like to just quickly thank Equizen Pro one more time for sponsoring this webinar. You began the discussion by talking about the importance of goal setting. And we did have a listener write in to say that their child, quote, doesn't think about the future, including what's going to happen in this coming year. That's part of the problem. How do we encourage future thinking as parents of students with ADHD?
That's a beautiful question. I think we start by meeting them where they are now. We start by saying, well, what would you like this week to look like? What would you like, in the short term? And then we build from there. But the other thing is usually something that like that wheel of life, and I've got other wheels of life I can send to all of you. That's another really great place to start. You can write and help your child generate this, different aspects of life. For instance, you could have academics, you could have your social life, you could have your hobbies and your interests, all of these different things to help them start thinking about what are the areas in my life I'm not as satisfied with, because that's where our goals come from. So give them some of that information and guidance. I also have a whole webinar I give on goal setting and lots of information. I could support you with that as well.
Okay. You mentioned the Wheel of Life and the two handouts. I just wanted to reiterate that those, first of all, if you're listening, you can download the slides at any time for this webinar. So you can take notes and whatnot. And those handouts will also be available, Cindy, on your site as well. Is that right?
If they just email me,
okay,
I will send them directly, because they're not all on. There's tons of blogs and things on my website, but these forms are not there. So just email me and I'll send it to you.
Okay. And that's Cindy at ptscoaching.com. Okay. Because we did have a few questions about the executive function wheel specifically and how it might be altered for elementary school students. Now, I know executive functions typically are strained for the first time in middle school, but a lot of parents are wondering if there are like red flags, warning signs, ways to gauge how we're doing in elementary school.
Yes, there definitely are. You know, and again, this is why I so stress get educated. If you don't understand and know what executive functions are, I mean, my first session of that Common Connected workshop is 2 hours. I do a really deep dive on what the executive functions are and everything. And the reason I say that is it's simple to know that your executive functions are things like processing speed and working memory and organizing and time management, things like that. But you have to really understand developmentally how these are impacting. So you're asking specifically about elementary school. We're already starting to see the signs, but what parents don't have the advantage that teachers have, teachers see a whole classroom of kids. Parents really just see their child. So you need to know, how is your child doing relative to other kids at this age? And remember, executive functions have nothing to do with level of intelligence. You can be up to 2 to 3 to 4 years behind in your executive function skill development, even though you have the highest IQ in the class. Okay, so you do see some warning signs, but it's so particular. That's why I say parent the child you have. It's so unique that I can't just rattle them off. Well, in elementary school, you know, if your kid's not doing this, it means this. It's a little broader than that.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see. So another question that we got related to maybe kids on the younger end of the scale here is you had mentioned, you know, common parent concerns, one of which is the IEP being followed. Several parents of younger kids said, how do we know? Like, our child is not necessarily able to verbalize whether his or her needs are being met on a daily basis. How can we get a view on whether the IEP or 504 plan is doing its job?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I would say is sometimes we try to shield our kids, you know, from knowing that they've got some of these challenges and knowing that they've got, you know, these support options and everything else. But guess what? Kids are more savvy than that. So I really think it's okay to share with your child, hey, listen, you're entitled to these services. The teacher's going to give you some of these supports, whether it's, you know, awareness of where you're sitting in the classroom, or maybe a second set of notes, or maybe the teacher sometimes wants to be able to help you pay attention, so the teacher wants to redirect you. The more you can help your kid, it's metacognition. It's thinking about what you're thinking about. The more you can help your child know what we're all doing to support that child, the better they're going to be able to respond to you about, yeah, you know what? The teacher's been doing that and it's been helpful. Or the teacher's been doing that and it's not helpful, or I'm embarrassed when she does that. So I would say involve your child as much as possible about what the supports they're getting are.
Okay. And along those same lines, do you have a rule of thumb for when a child should actually be included in IEP meetings?
So remember I said, and I say this all the time, parent the child you have. I have known kids who literally wanted to be in their IEP meeting in first grade. Why? Because they realized that they were in resource room and they realized something different was going on. They wanted to know why. And they had questions. So I would have the kid be in, it doesn't have to be the formal meeting, obviously, but have that three-way meeting with the parent and the teacher and the student as early as you think your child would be ready, even if it's just a 10-minute meeting after school. So I would say a lot earlier than probably most people think about involving their child in the process.
Very interesting, because we are getting a number of questions from parents of high school students, and specifically on this topic of self-advocacy. So there are kind of I'm seeing two ends of the spectrum. One, someone wrote in to say that their child with ADHD does try to self-advocate and that they're interpreted as being argumentative. So that's one end. And the other end is a teenager who, it sounds like they've been bullied over the years and have developed a defense mechanism, which is to stay under the radar and not say a word. Yeah. Can you offer advice for these two differing challenges?
Yeah. One of the things about kids that we have to respect is they're entitled to their privacy and they're entitled to fly under the radar, right? But when they're doing it at the detriment of their own support, we want to understand that child more. When your kid is in, I would say, upper high school and college, I've got coaches that can work with the kids to help them work on their advocacy skills. And the way they work on that is by helping them understand their own brain and where they're getting stuck and what support would really be helpful. For the younger ones, it's all about collaborative problem solving. It's all about understanding what's getting in the way of them wanting to be seen. What can I do? And how can I share with you my concerns about this so that I can help you move forward? If they feel like they've been bullied, first of all, we always have to believe that, right? Because unfortunately that does go on. But we want to help that kid understand what they can and cannot do to control this. Sometimes it's about how can we help them speak to the right people that can, alleviate some of those concerns. But again, it all comes back to being honest and open with the student as early and as often as possible.
Okay. And I know the answer will probably be, it depends on the child, but a number of parents are feeling quite uncomfortable relinquishing control going into high school and wondering, okay, what is appropriate here? Like, is it appropriate for me as a caregiver to email high school teachers to alert them to the 504 IEP, to share? One parent here said that they last year shared a sort of person-centered resume of their child's strengths. Is this overstepping?
Okay, good question. Once they're in high school, we need to make sure that they're involved, as I said, right? There is still behind the scenes parenting that goes on, and that's a reality. Whenever possible, I would, include the kid. But if you feel, hey, I need the teacher to know certain things, then I do still think it can be appropriate, but lean toward asking the kids' input and support. One thing I do want to say about looking at that homework portal, the portal that the teacher has for the student, I always tell parents, do not look at that without your child. You want your child knowing that you're looking at it And you may have an agreement with them. I work with parents a lot on, what's the agreement that we need to make around looking at these things, because you want the child to be able to advocate for themselves with you, and you want them to be able to be aware that you have this information. You don't want them feeling like they need to sneak around. Okay. So have an agreement about when you're looking at the portal and when you might need to reach out to the teacher. Hey, you know what? I'm willing to work with you with this. I see you have a bunch of missing homeworks. If this doesn't, work out, we're going to need to reach out to the teacher. Does that help a little bit, I hope?
Yes, it does. We do have a related question that's been echoed by a few people here, but someone wrote in to say, how can I best find out how to help my child when he simply doubles down on, I hate school, and won't articulate? So I'm guessing we're talking middle school here.
Yeah. So when a child hates school, this is a very serious thing. It's saying a lot. I mean, we cannot take this seriously enough, because we know how out of hand these things can get. The kid could really start to feel shut down. Our number one thing is we want them to feel safe. We want them to feel like there's someone in the school that's a safe person for them. But if they're really hating school, we want to help them love learning. So maybe one of the things we could do is pare back on some of the expectations, especially the ones that, let's say the kid, there's one subject that the kid likes, but the rest of the subjects they really don't. Maybe we need to pull back on our expectations on some of those subjects and have that one subject be where they are focusing on, where they can feel good about themselves, where maybe our expectation is, let's just focus on, making sure the reading is done and getting the homework in and helping you feel like you're mastering that, so they can feel like they have the ability to learn. Okay. So don't, parse it out a little bit. Just focus on one or two things at a time. Don't overload them.
Right. It sounds from these comments that one big hurdle for many students and parents is homework. School has not even started up for most of us, and that is overwhelmingly the concern here among caregivers. How can we go into a new school year in a way, learning from our past experience and challenges with homework, which is largely getting it all done without great stress and family anguish, offering that insight to the teachers without starting off on a negative tone with them.
Yeah. Homework is a problem. That's why you notice that one of the slides I said, never let your relationship suffer at the altar of homework. Right? I would say we have to figure out what our role is. We have to work with our kid. Remember, and this is why I referenced Carol Dweck's work of growth mindset. We don't want to make it just about the grades. We want to make it about building their executive function skills, because if they can start looking at homework as a way to get better at managing their own time so that they can have free time, and what do they need to do? There's a lot of tools and strategies. I have a whole workshop. I'm realizing now I should probably be giving this earlier. I usually give it much later in the year, called Managing Homework, Tips, Tools, and Strategies, and What's Your Role, meaning the parent role. Because parents need to have the insights of how to help their kids, but not do it with them and for them. But one of the biggest roles you have to do is agree with your child on what role you're playing. And sometimes that might be pulling back more than you want to and letting your kid kind of feel the weight of their own decisions, and then knowing how to say, okay, kiddo, let's figure out how to help you move forward with that.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of people wondering, can we just ask the teacher for no homework? Can we,
I'll weigh in on that a little bit.
Okay.
Because, when I do the teacher training, one of the assignments I have for the teacher is, what is it you want your student to get out of doing homework? Is it that you're trying to reinforce that, the learning by practice? Is it that you're trying to get a sense of how many of the kids understand? Whatever you need, right? So I would say helping the teacher know how your kid is reacting to homework. Keep a log of how long your kid is spending on homework. The teacher may have no idea that your kid is spending 20 minutes on an assignment when they thought it was like a 5-minute assignment. So it's not this all or nothing. Talk to the teacher about how the kid's reacting to it.
Okay, that's a great idea from the very get-go. Log time spent on assignments so that you can share that. Because I think you're right. Many teachers just don't have a really clear idea and don't want their students to be up late and stressed out and resentful. So, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying it's a whole family system because homework sets the tone for the whole day with the relationship with the parents sometimes too.
Oh, absolutely. Evenings, mornings, after school, homework touches it all.
Yep.
And so on this topic, we got a really interesting question about managing communication across multiple households in addition to with school and home. So in the case of divorced parents or other living situations where multiple caregivers are in different households. Do you have any advice for making sure that everyone is collaborating as effectively as they can?
Yes, I've dealt with a lot of complex family relationships. I always tell parents, I don't do parent therapy, I do parent coaching. And one of the issues we deal with is I suggest even if your ex-spouse or the other person is not playing along as you would like, always include them on the emails to the teacher. And always ask the teacher to include them on the emails coming back so that at least they are aware of what is going on. And if you're really struggling, then have a third person work with both sides to say, okay, what are some reasonable rules and expectations we want to have around communicating?
Okay. And would you recommend having some discussion about, okay, what's a reasonable amount of time, for example, that we can dedicate to homework? Or what is our response if the child refuses to do their homework?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things we could do if the kid is refusing to do their homework, but mostly what we wanted to understand is why. But some kids do. They refuse to do the homework in one household, but they do it absolutely the other. And then one parent feels like, see, if you just did it my way, but it's really much more complex than that, right? So you do want to have discussions and joint expectations. And even if you're in separate households, you have to have the same messaging to that student. Absolutely. It has to be, the expectations for the student has to be kind of co-signed off by all the parents or guardians involved.
Mm-hmm. Transparency on expectations and consequences, right? Because we know that a lack of congruity can make children with ADHD very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so by being very transparent and open, I think that's great. That's great advice. Okay, well, we are actually just about out of time here. This has been really helpful. So much very practical advice. And I will just remind everyone listening that Cindy has graciously offered that you can email her for resources. That's Cindy at ptscoaching.com. Her website is the same, ptscoaching.com. Lots of follow-up resources there. We will also be following up with resources in an email that will follow this live event. So a lot of people asking, they're hungry. They're hungry. We will get it to you. We promise. So Cindy, thank you so much for all of the resources and advice and insight you provided today. This has been really helpful as a kickoff to the new school year. And I also would like to thank everyone who joined us today to contribute your questions and your voice to our ADHD community. We hope you will join us for more free webinars. To make sure you don't miss any future Attitude webinars, articles, or research updates, you can sign up to receive our free newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. If you are listening in replay or podcast mode, visit attitudemag.com and search podcast number 413 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the certificate of attendance option. If you support the work we're doing here at Attitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine. You can get ready for the back to school season with our fall issue, which includes our annual Success at School section, including articles on homework help, teacher collaboration, ADHD accommodations, bullying, and much, much more. We hope to see everyone again soon. Cindy, thank you again for this great presentation.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.